the New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. Great to be back again. Also joining us today is Paul Brislen. How are you, Paul?
No, I'm good, thanks. How are you doing, Paul?
Excellent. Good to catch up again during these interesting and crazy times. You think that things are maybe going to start getting a bit simpler, and then there's a war. So not really the simplest of times, is it?
No. It's always good to be entertained and have lots going on, but I could do with a little bit of a break. Maybe a quiet and peaceful life for a little while would be quite nice. But, so far so good.
So we've got a lot going on. Maybe you can just remind listeners of where you fit into this big wide world of tech and telecommunications and media.
Absolutely. So I run the Telecommunications Forum, which is kind of the industry association for the telco sector. All of the telcos, or the vast bulk of the telcos, belong. And we do a lot of the code compliance work. So whenever the government says, things like, well, you must allow number portability or emergency calling has to work, we're the ones who sit down and put together a working party to figure out just how we can make Vodafone and Chorus, Spark and 2 Degrees all work together and communicate at a practical level. But we also raise issues. We try to get ahead of things that might be a problem for the sector, and generally raise the profile and talk about some of the cool stuff that we're doing, because the New Zealand telco sector is a very busy place and there's an awful lot going on. And I think a lot of people seem to think it's still the way it was in the bad old days, of the telecom monopoly and a lack of innovation, when nothing could be further from the truth. So it's a busy year this year, and certainly a busy time for the sector in general.
Before we jump in, I should say, thanks to our show partners who help keep the New Zealand Tech Podcast operating. So big thanks to Vocus, Vodafone, Spark. So a lot of support from the telecommunications world, HP, and Gorilla Technology. Let's jump in. First up, we've heard in the last few days about Spark's latest profit announcements, and they're doing reasonably well. They're $179 million after-tax profit for the 6-month period through to end of December, which was I think 22% increase on the same period the year before. And you can delve in with all the ins and outs on that. But one of their announcements was this establishment of the Spark Tower Co. To improve how they work with capital and with their more passive assets. Is this something you're across, Paul? Because we've heard Vodafone New Zealand are doing something somewhat similar, right?
Yeah. So this is looking at all of the cell phone towers, all of the physical infrastructure that both companies have got, and saying, well, are we really the best place to own and run these networks? Is it a point of difference for us? Can we simply sell it off to a third party who actually specializes in doing this kind of thing? And internationally, this has happened in a number of countries. Australia has long since given up having separate networks for each of the mobile companies over there. A company called Crown Infrastructure bought up all of the assets, and it's going through and rationalizing so that you don't get, you've probably seen them, there'll be one cell site with 3 towers side by side, they'll come along and say, well, that's inefficient. We'll reduce the number of towers. We'll just put in one taller tower with 3 lots of equipment hanging off them. And this is what both Spark and Vodafone have decided separately that is the way forward. I'll be interested to see who. What sort of company, if it's a company at all, steps up to buy the assets and how they're going to run them. I could see Cordia, for example, is a New Zealand telco that used to be called BCL. And the B in BCL was Broadcast. It was the company that built all of the towers for the radio industry back in the day. And they were part of TVNZ for a very long time, got spun off in the late 90s into their own entity. But this is their bread and butter, right? This is something they do day in, day out. They design and build towers for the telco sector here and overseas. And it's something that they're very good at doing. So you could see a government entity like Cordia make a play and say, okay, well, we'll buy the assets and run them for you. Or it could easily be something that you list and float on the stock market. Time will tell. It is a very money-intensive business. The returns are very razor thin and take a long time to come through. But I think it means that there is an opportunity with this kind of project to look at where do we have network, but more importantly, where don't we have network? And geographically, there's a lot of New Zealand that doesn't have cell phone coverage. We cover, I think the 3 networks are almost at 99% population coverage.
That's right.
Vodafone, Spark, and 2 Degrees. But in terms of geography, as soon as you drive outside of town, you rapidly start to see coverage drop off, because it is a very expensive business to put a tower up in the middle of somewhere that may only have maybe 5 cars a day go through, maybe 10 people a day visiting. That's a lot of capital tied up in a tower that doesn't get a lot of use. So it'll be fascinating to see just which way it goes.
Yeah, and of course we have seen the government through Crown Infrastructure, investing into helping expand the mobile networks. So the black spot, funding and mobile black spot funding, and investing to reach those places that from a simple economics perspective for a telecommunications provider, it may not stack up for them, but from the overall perspective for New Zealand, for our people, we don't want to leave somebody that has an accident out in the country stuck with a 100-kilometre walk to get to coverage, to ask for some help, or all the other scenarios that are there. When we have those challenges. So it's going to be interesting to see how that progresses. Of course we've got Chorus and the local fibre companies that own the fibre infrastructure that has put New Zealand in such good stead over these periods of lockdown. There's probably a lot to be said for the good sides of it. We do sometimes see some of the downsides of businesses that have I guess tried to maybe make their balance sheets look a little bit better, and sometimes the way in which chief executives and leaders within an organization get remunerated there can be these varying sort of incentives, and some of them encourage a sort of a shorter term approach. Now, I'm not suggesting this is one of those cases, but I was reading recently around how automakers have got out of doing so many things that they used to be able to do in terms of making their vehicles. Oh no, that's outsourced to there, or somebody else does this, but somebody else does that. And Tesla have kind of gone this other track of, well, we're going to try and do, as much as we can as possible to control their own destiny, to be able to innovate and so on. And it certainly helped them during the supply chain and chip shortage types of issues. So there can sometimes be another side to this, and I'd be interested to see how they navigate this. If they no longer own that infrastructure, will it take even longer? Does it become harder when something goes wrong? If it's somebody else's asset that you don't actually have the control over, unless you've been very, very strategic and smart in terms of how you put that together, which of course our telcos are. So I'm sure they'll get that stuff pretty right. But it'll be interesting in maybe a decade's time to look back and to see, okay, how did it all go, and is it working well?
Yeah. Well, these you're quite right. That asset ownership is one thing, but owning the intellectual property and the strategic understanding of how these assets work is essential. And I don't think any of the telcos would let go of that for a third party. I mean, when it comes to quality control and providing that core service to your customers, they don't want to let anybody else get in front of them on that. So they will retain that ownership, I think. But the physical plant, the towers, it could well be a turning point in terms of rollout and deployment, and just how quickly we can get stuff out into the rural sector. It'll fall on the shoulders of one company potentially, or possibly two, rather than the telcos themselves. So it'll be very interesting to see just how that works. And of course, as we all know, all of the cell phone towers are death rays, and they will give you COVID and activate the chemtrails and the nanobots. So you've got all of that madness to deal with. That all becomes somebody else's problem. And I know several people in the industry who will be delighted to hand all of that off to somebody else to worry about. You can go to the public sessions and explain that cell phones don't cause cancer. It'll be fine. You go and do that.
Yeah, good luck with that. I think they will still turn up on the doorsteps of telcos and protest, and
with their cell phones to take the pictures.
Yeah. So, but these things are still going to happen. Now, shortly, I want to come to hear a little bit about what's happening at TCF, Telecommunications Forum, which you're the chief executive of. There were, I guess, a few devices I've been looking at over the last few days. That have a quick, quick chat through on those before we talk TCF. Samsung Galaxy Ultra S22. That's been interesting to have a little bit of a look at and a play with. I've also been playing around with the S21 FE, the fan edition. So that's one of the new, fairly new gadgets as well. And it's nice to see these different price tiers becoming available, so you can actually get some really good tech, high-end tech, but by having the different layers, the different pricing, it makes it more accessible. We're expecting, the rumor mill suggests anyway, an announcement from Apple, I think a week or so out, where they might sort of fill that lower end gap with apparently the rumors suggest a replacement for their now, must be about 2 years old, their iPhone SE. And that's the product that gets them into the lower price points and gives them access to a broader client base. But we see these top companies wanting to hit the top price points and get as much as they can in terms of margin and in terms of capabilities and features, as well as trying to go down to varying sort of lower price points. Also got to look at the Oppo, their new flagship phone, the Find X5 Pro, which is launching in New Zealand over the next few weeks. That's coming in around $2,000. Very, very slick phone, and of course, there's a range of models as usual. So that's kind of their top price point, but very, very nice looking phone. So they're really continuing to do everything they can to attract that attention away from Samsung and Apple and so on. And we see these announcements have come out of Oppo and at least one of the other Chinese smartphone makers saying, hey, we're going after Apple. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because Apple seem to be doing stronger than ever in the Chinese market. And in fact, globally, in terms of where the profits are for smartphones, well, Apple still remains very much in the driver's seat. We saw a report just come through in the last few days. Global smartphone revenue hitting a record high of, and this figure is just staggering. US dollars, $450 billion last year. Apple, doing the very much the best on the front of actually taking the profits, and even just in terms of total revenue. So this report came from Counterpoint, and what did they have? They had out of that 448 billion, 196 billion of it they accounted to Apple. So that left the next player as Samsung with 72. So 72 billion, which in itself is an astounding number. But Apple sort of more than 2.5 times in terms of the revenue there. So huge amounts of money sloshing around, but most of it's ending up in Cupertino, off to California.
It's amazing how large this market is these days, isn't it? I mean, smartphones, not that long ago, 10 years ago, before the iPhone, smartphones were a niche product that only the most devoted fan would buy. The Nokia smartphone at $1,500 was an absolute outlier, and here you are with $2,000 for an Oppo Find X5. That's astounding. I don't think my laptop costs that much. It's I do wonder if the phone makers are really pricing themselves out of a large chunk of the market.
Well, that's why they're coming in with these different tiers, right? So if you want the best of the best from a vendor, a lot of storage, a lot of performance, a lot of RAM, incredible cameras, night photography that you probably couldn't get out of your digital SLR, and totally. Some regards, because of the AI, because of the the smart stuff that's being done, in software, in their AI chips that are in there. You pay for it, and they seem to be doing doing pretty well, right? And
totally. People are buying them. So
the example of that,
yeah, absolutely.
Those numbers are pretty astounding. I would actually like to compare them with what the car market's looking at. So I'll try and look that up, because I'm kind of curious, because there's such different markets in terms of how much you spend, but of course the figure gets down to a certain level that people are quite happy to spend that figure over and over and over again, and of course you take your smartphone in the car, and it becomes the important piece of technology kind of wherever you are, isn't it? So
absolutely.
Also on the gadget front, some new laptops coming into the market. Lenovo have just announced their first Snapdragon, or which is a ARM processor-based ThinkPad X13S. And, as usual, I take these numbers with a grain of salt, but they're talking about a 28-hour battery life in a laptop that's just fractionally over a kilo. So, I'm kind of curious to see how that will play out compared to what Apple are doing with their MacBooks with the M1 chip that have got, astounding battery life performance kind of combination, but on the Windows side, it's been a little bit lackluster with what we've seen there in the past. So the X13S has got this new Snapdragon, I hate these names, Snapdragon 8CX Gen 3. And so
very prosaic.
Sure,
yes.
if you live and breathe these things, that might excite you. But anyway, that's the current iteration. I guess we have had worse names from from other vendors. But anyway, it'll be interesting to see how that one actually plays out. And they're targeting, being a ThinkPad, it's being targeted at businesses, which haven't really been heavily, targeted with, these ARM-based chips rather than the sort of Intel or AMD. So, I'm kind of curious how that'll play out. The other device is the new Surface Laptop Studio from Microsoft, which is actually what I'm recording through today. And look, I'd heard a little bit about this new Surface Laptop Studio, and I was a bit, confused with the strange sort of shape. You've got this, it looks like a laptop when you sort of look down on it, but then there's kind of this piece under the main bit, so it makes it quite fat. But what that allows them to do is to build in some cooling, and when you've got an ability to do some cooling, it allows you to put in some real grunt from a processing perspective, from graphics, and I guess effectively they're sort of referring to it as a real sort of workstation class computer. And so, it'll be quite interesting just to see how it does play out performance-wise. One of the things that I've mentioned before about issues with the reliability of Microsoft Surface products, and they've been a little bit hit and miss at times. They've been sitting at the bottom of the ranks from a reliability perspective of the laptop manufacturers. But one of the things that hurt them was some of the flexibility that they gave you. So with their Surface Book, you could take the screen off, turn it round, and and then close it so that you had a screen on top to scribble on with your stylus, and that was all very good. But when you separated it, you were causing a bit of disconnection with some of the components, namely the graphics processing, graphics processor, and some battery, and invariably at times that would go haywire, and you'd have issues or other disconnect issues where they disconnect when you're using them. So this approach that it is actually all one piece, you don't separate anything off, but the screen can fold in such a way you can bring the screen down on the laptop by folding it, and then you've kind of got this in between mode that is somewhat reminiscent of Microsoft Surface Studio. So, so far I've been quite impressed. 14.4-inch screen, starting at about just under 2,700 New Zealand dollars, and that's launched, I think, either today or yesterday. It's just launched pretty much. So that one should be out there for the Surface fans. Very, very modern in terms of the graphics processing. The only thing that I find a little bit odd around the timing is that it's based on Intel 11th gen chip, which is kind of the model chip that was coming out around this time last year. That probably puts Microsoft, competitively a little bit behind the eight ball as we start seeing new laptops from other manufacturers landing with the 12th gen chips, and their one will be sitting on last year's model. And I think they've just kind of decided that they're going to take their own track on that, and they're not going to pay so much attention. It's certainly not the first time they've done that. So but just something to be aware of if you're very concerned about the numbers and whether you're getting the best bang for your buck. Right, let's talk TCF, Paul.
Okay.
Now, but before we started, we were having a bit of a chat around number porting, and we're in this great position that we didn't used to be on, and you can probably remind me, when this journey started exactly. But it's very easy to change from one, mobile telecommunications provider to another, and your number goes with you. But it wasn't that many years ago. If you wanted to change to another provider, you had to get a new number, and all the pain and discomfort that caused.
That's right.
But on the flip side, the times have changed from a cybersecurity perspective, and bank fraud and so on. So making it so super easy to change from one to another meant that we ended up with people's number being moved away without it actually not necessarily being the owner of the number that was initiated.
That's right. Yeah. It's probably, must be a decade, if not longer now, since number portability was introduced, and it's the goal was.
Must be right, because I remember it being one of the, if my memory's serving me well, which sometimes it does, I remember it seemed to be a topic from quite early on after we started New Zealand Tech Podcast. Was this exciting thing you could port your number, but we take it for granted now.
Well, we do, and you even at the time, a lot of people just assumed, of course, you can take your number when you switch. What do you mean you can't? But you remember the old prefixes, 027 and 025 were telecom, and 021 was Vodafone. And that was it. There was no way you could possibly ever take your number and use the other provider. Largely, that was seen as an anti-competitive barrier to switching. So the commissioner and the TCF worked together and came up with this number portability scheme, and it means it is very easy to change numbers to keep your number when you change providers in New Zealand. It's one of the best forms of sort of customer data rights that you'll find in operation around the world. This ability to take your number, go to another provider, and carry on, because as a customer, it's seamless. There's no break. What it does mean, though, is a number of fraudsters have discovered that if they've captured all of your personal information, certainly your banking information, there was this problem that they couldn't transfer a lot of money from your account to their account without you getting a text message alerting you to it. Because the banks all jumped on two-factor authentication a long time ago. So they would port your number from your device to their device because they had all your personal information. They could convince the shop or the call center to do this, and your number would suddenly appear on their phone. That meant when they transferred your bank funds around, they could authorize the transaction. So for the last few months, we've been working to introduce an extra step in the porting process to make it a little bit harder. Now you have to approve the transfer yourself. So if you are porting your number, you'll get a message saying, "Hi, this is the Telco Forum. You're porting your number. Please reply yes to proceed." And if you don't say yes, if you say anything else, it stops the process. Which means hopefully the fraudsters won't be able to then swap your number out to their phone, talk to your bank about transferring that $100,000 into your bank account, from your bank account into theirs, and then authorize the transaction on the phone, it'll still sit with you. So you'll have some ability to resist that. And I have to say, it's working quite well. We've seen a number of people attempt to port other people's numbers and get blocked as a result of this. And people are very concerned. What do you mean somebody's porting my number? I haven't authorized that. And they'll ring their provider and find out just what's going on, which is great. That's exactly what we want. So
that's great.
So that's working really well.
Does it tell you what provider from to? Does it give you a little bit, a little bit of?
No, I don't think we do, because there are also privacy implications and also competition implications. So for a long time, because of various machinations, you couldn't actually tell a customer who they were porting to, which, clearly if a sane world existed, the lawyers would have said, well, that's ridiculous, and sorted that out on day one. But it's taken a while to get there. But right. Yeah, if you ring your telco now and say somebody's trying to port my number and I don't want it to go, they will be able to act on your behalf and see what's going on. Yeah.
Oh, it's interesting. Yeah, because I'm just thinking of the scenarios that we get now, where people are tricked into doing different things, and somebody might figure out which telco you're with, or they call up and say, hey, it's Bob here from this telco. We've got a special offer for you to move you to a new plan. You will get a text message confirming that your number's being ported, but this is just to put you on the special new plan that I've just offered you, which of course is going to be half the price. So when you get that message, you just need to say yes. Whereas of course, the more information that's in there that says, hey, we're moving you from, I don't know, let's say Spark to Vodafone to 2 Degrees, whatever. The more, I would imagine, the more sort of extra stuff that's in there, probably makes it a little bit harder for people to get scammed. And we hear of that with
money,
multi-factor authentication and so on. It's not perfect, and so
it's a balance, isn't it, between being a totally secure environment that you can't ever change without providing a lot of detail, or usability and being able to do things on the fly. And I think providers, banking, telecommunications, whatever kind of service they're providing, they're constantly juggling to make sure that you can access your stuff, but there is a degree of accountability in there as well. I rang my insurance company the other day, and I can't access the online app at all. And it says, yes, we've sent you a reset thing to your email address, and nothing ever arrives. So I rang them and managed to convince them to change the email address that they're going to send it to a different account that I've got. Now, I didn't provide them any information that you couldn't find out about me just through Googling. So I'm very concerned that their security protocols are a bit lax. Once I actually get access to my insurance details, I will then be ringing them and saying, this is not on. You should not have given me the ability to do that, because just because I know my name and my address, that doesn't mean I am the person responsible for that account. You've got to have more in place than that. Yeah,
often
absolutely.
These things aren't thought through to the level that they should be. I walked into a large, one of the largest, buildings in New Zealand a few months ago, and with the COVID situation, you weren't just able to get up to the floor and so on. They decided that they were going to control it differently. So the way they controlled it differently was to have swipe cards at the front desk that you went to. So you went to the front desk and they would give you a swipe card, and you could swipe up, and then you'd just need to return the card when you got down. Now, I don't know, none of that made any sense to me. But anyway, I got the swipe card, and then I found it very interesting. Once I got to the floor, I was able to swipe straight into the company I was visiting.
Fabulous.
And I thought, no, that's not quite right. And then I tried it on the there was more than one entity on that floor. So I tried it against, without entering, but I just did the tap.
Yep.
A very, very, very large international organisation that would care about its security, and I was able to tap and get immediate access to that one. Should I be dodgy? So
that's not well thought out.
Areas where security is a challenge, and that's just. These things aren't going away, but hopefully over time they keep getting a bit better, and it sounds like TCF is playing their part to help move things forward. So that's great, Paul.
Fingers crossed. Yes.
Yep. Now there's a new dispute resolution service being put together. We're going to hear about that one later on this year, because TCF plays that important sort of role as the go-to, a little bit like we have a banking ombudsman and so on, or is it insurance, or we've got both? I lose track of all these things. But TCF has that sort of role for the telecommunications world.
Yeah, we do. We have the current scheme is called the Telecommunications Dispute Resolution Service. If you have a problem with your provider and you've reached the end of the line and they say, well, there's nothing more that we can do to solve the problem for you, and you're still not happy, you can take it to the Dispute Resolution Service. And the website is tdr.org.nz. And you can go on through there. You can ring them. They'll guide you through the process. You can sort out the issue you've got with the provider, and hopefully come away with a good resolution. This scheme's been in place for 14, 15 years, something like that. Times have changed in dispute resolution land, and the standard now is for a totally independent, standalone service that is arm's length from the industry. So we're just working through what that looks like for the telco sector, how we can build a system that stands alone, what kind of terms of reference it should have, what kind of code of conduct it should have, and once we've got all of that assembled and put together, we'll deploy that probably second half of this year at some stage, and that will replace the current scheme. We get a lot of kudos for the scheme in New Zealand. It works really well. I think customers don't have to pay. If you've got a problem, you can just ring and it is all taken care of. You go through the process. You don't have to pay to join or to lay a complaint. But yeah, it is a gold-plated service. So we're having a good look at what we'll keep and what the future looks like, and try and launch that, as I say, in the second half of the year. So there's a lot of work going on that front at the moment.
Oh, that's really that's really encouraging. And one of the challenges that a lot of listeners will probably hear about, they may not have directly encountered it themselves, but as can be the way that telcos sort of communicate different messages, because they're heavily driven to beat their competition, and it's a very, very competitive market. I was shared with me recently some communications an individual got recently, and from a large telco, letting them know that the copper's not that's not sticking around for forever, sort of thing, and so their telco was moving them off their nice seemed to be a reasonably stable and fast service onto a fixed wireless broadband over the mobile network. Turned out was going to be a bunch slower and so on, but there was a $10 a month savings, so it was the right thing to do. And then there was what someone cynical might say was a fair degree of manipulation in the email to convince them that was absolutely the right track, and they shouldn't push back and not accept this new connection they were going to automatically be moved to. Is that part of what the TCF is sort of plays into in terms of setting some standards around communications? I mean, obviously not every organisation is going to get everything right all the time, because they're made up of individual people, and not everybody knows everything or gets everything right all the time.
Totally.
How do you
It's
see that?
yeah, it is an area we're looking at quite closely. The Commerce Commission has challenged us to come up with a code for what they call marketing alternate services, and that's exactly what you're talking about. When we're in the throes of moving an entire population from an old technology of copper to the new world order, how do you go about managing that? How do you make sure the customer isn't being moved before the copper's being switched off? How do you make sure that people understand the technology that's being used? How do we talk about speeds and capabilities in a way that's comparable between telcos? So it is a massive body of work. It's a difficult thing to juggle because you've got to allow the marketers room to talk about the products and differentiate and say, this is a product that would suit you. So you'll see we're putting in place some guidelines around how you can talk about things like speed, for example, is an obvious one. What you can do with that plan. I don't know if you remember all those years ago, Whoosh Wireless was on the scene, and Whoosh used to talk about how good it'll be for online gaming. And I remember getting a set at one of the kit at home. It had a little antenna on a sucker that you'd stick on the window, and it would plug into your laptop, and away you would go. And it was absolutely awful for online gaming because when the founder talked about gaming, he was talking about playing Minesweeper or one of the games on his computer. He didn't know what I was talking about with this. It's great for online gaming.
Yeah, like some sort of board game or something.
Yeah, chess on the computer. And obviously that's not really terribly accurate, and it's quite misleading. So we're trying to allow the telcos enough freedom to market and to make it exciting, but also provide sort of lane guidance to make sure they're talking about things in the right way. And it is a big body of work, because you're quite right. We don't want to scare people into moving. Nobody wants to force a customer to buy a product that they're then unhappy with, because the long-term impacts of that are just outrageous. And there's no need for it. At the moment, nobody is being cut off. No copper is being pulled out. No connections are being terminated. They won't be moved from copper to a new technology until that technology is available. So in most areas, that will be fiber. Chorus is going to be switching off copper in areas where fiber has reached a certain saturation point, but that's all still to be determined. And it's a problem, but it's a good problem to have, because fiber now in New Zealand is out to, we're fast approaching 87% of the population can access fiber to the home. In Australia, famously, they've overspent by $30 billion on their fiber deployment, and it's available to about 25 to 28% of the population. The UK, when you're talking about fiber to the home in the UK, they're talking about 30% of the population. So basically, if you're outside of London, you can forget about it. You're just not getting fiber to the home. Whereas we're out to 87% of the population. It is a tremendous, as you've seen during COVID, it's meant that we could all go home and work from home and carry on regardless, without having to worry about lagging and too many people using Zoom all at the same time and all that kind of thing. It's worked exceedingly well. So we want to make the best of that and move people over to fiber as quickly as possible. But there are always going to be people who don't want to move off copper for whatever reason. They think it's fantastic. It does everything they want. Why should I move? And at some point over the next decade, they are going to have to make the decision about what technology they're going to use. And unfortunately, it's getting harder and harder to find the equipment to run a copper network, to find the personnel who are trained on a copper network. They're starting to migrate to other technologies. It will become much more expensive to keep your copper line, and ultimately for very little value, because the fiber networks and the fixed wireless networks offer so much more capability. But we've got to manage that transition, right?
Absolutely. If you've got fibre available, then my general recommendation is that's your
the one
gold
to go
standard.
for.
Go to it. It doesn't and it's not unusual for people to find moving from copper to fibre with a new plan and whatnot that it ends up being a lower cost for them. So and I think most listening to the New Zealand Tech podcast probably be familiar
Probably
with it.
already there. I mean, we had 7 adults in the house here with lockdown.
Yeah.
I was working from home. I had 3 kids studying. My in-laws were here. They were on Netflix or Disney or watching sport channels or whatever. We saturated the link, and I have at the time I had a 1 gig connection, and it didn't skip a beat. It was a lifesaver. It absolutely was, because 7 adults in a house without entertainment options rapidly becomes a problem. But as I said, it didn't skip a beat. I've upgraded to, thanks to Allcon, I'm now sitting at 4 gigabits per second. The problem I've discovered, of course, is that my switches within the house aren't capable of delivering that. So I've upgraded the connection in the street, and my house is still only at 1,000 megabits a second. I mean, it's science fiction, isn't it? It's just incredible.
It's Brislen. You need to drop at least 10K on your internal network infrastructure. And
listen, I've got Cat 6 throughout the house, and I just need the Wi-Fi hotspots to be upgraded, and then I'm set to go. So if you need to test some Wi-Fi 6 kit, let me know. I'm your man. I can take it off your hands, Paul.
There you go. Well, the Wi-Fi 6E now is, I guess, what's starting to come through. Now, we should talk about what's been going on, between Ukraine and Russia, and what some of those implications, could be. So there's been, a bit of coverage there around how this could, impact supply chains. We understand Ukraine is really the key or the biggest producer of neon gas that is used for lasers in the chip supply process, for more than responsible for more than 90% of semiconductor grade neon for the US. Now, I'm not quite sure that was coming through from Reuters. We actually know that most of the chips aren't made in the US, but that was interesting. And then 35% of palladium, rare metal that's used for semiconductors, that comes out of Russia. So all of the craziness that's going on with this Russian attack on Ukraine, not only have we got people dying and people's futures are at stake there, but potentially there's sort of global flow on to impact what has already been a pretty challenging period as far as chip production and getting hold of the technology that a lot of entities need. And then we've also been hearing today around what should be going on to sanction Russia as far as crypto is concerned. Now, you had a little bit of a look at that one. What are your thoughts on this? It doesn't seem like there's these sort of necessarily easy answers, but I don't know. It does seem as though we've got all the sports seem to be boycotting Russia. So many countries have put sanctions on there, but the crypto world doesn't seem to think that it should apply to them.
Totally.
And I don't know. I'm scratching my head on this one a little bit as to what is the right way to respond.
Well, it's a good question. I mean, the international banking community operates an exchange called SWIFT, which is much like the internet, but for financial transactions. Russia has been cut off from that, which means that it's going to be very difficult for the country to buy stuff from overseas, pay for things. That all grinds to a halt quite quickly. And we saw the impact on the Russian currency, the ruble. I think it lost 40% of its value overnight, which really will hurt the oligarchs in particular. But what apparently is happening is a lot of them are using cryptocurrency to continue to move money around the place to pay for things internationally, and generally to skirt the restrictions that have been put in place. So you've got to wonder whether that is something that needs to be addressed, whether it is a good thing. The cryptocurrency boys would tell you that this is exactly what it was designed for, so that no country can say, we will stop you from spending your money. But at a national and an international level, we're not talking about an individual spending money here. We're actually talking about a global community saying, no, actually, what you're doing, Russia, is wrong, and you need to stop the invasion straight away and withdraw. Otherwise, we're going to cut you off. If there's a way around that, it weakens their ability to affect change in Russia, and it means that quite likely the war and its atrocities will be prolonged, which is not really a good outcome for anybody, I don't think. So it's a very interesting. It's really the first time the cryptocurrency community has come across this as an issue on this scale. Do we continue to operate as a non-national based currency, or do we try to help stop the war in Ukraine?
Yeah, and there's also been the positive use of crypto, where a crowdfunding campaign has raised over $20 million US for Ukraine to help them out through this time. Look, yeah, I think it's probably pretty complex. What we've seen coming back from the crypto exchanges like Coinbase. So that the statement I saw from Coinbase was that they will not institute a blanket ban on all Coinbase transactions involving Russian addresses, but they are, complying with the international sanctions. And look, I'm not quite sure what that means, but I think there's an aspect where it's actually pretty hard for some of these entities to they don't have the data around exactly who owns a particular address, right? And so the ability for say Coinbase to block these things would never be across the board anyway, because that's part of the nature. There is a level of anonymity that tends to come with the blockchain world, although that doesn't always play out as well as what some people might expect. And we talked about the couple that were trying to launder billions of dollars of funds. When was that? A couple of weeks back. There's a lot of visibility, but the whole picture's not quite there. Look, I think it is complex, and there's maybe some parallels with the discussions where countries have wanted encryption to be shut down, and it's like, well, it's not quite that simple. You break a whole lot of stuff when you do. So. But we'll leave it at that. We could probably go a lot deeper into these things, Paul. But I think we've run our time slot. So thank you very much for joining the New Zealand Tech Podcast this week.
Oh no, thanks for having me. Always happy to chat about all the latest and greatest. So more power to it.
Excellent. Well, thanks everyone for joining us again on New Zealand Tech Podcast. We will be back again next week, and of course, you can find us across the varying social networks. And if you want to catch the live streams, they tend to happen on a Tuesday afternoon around 4:00. across a range of places such as Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn quite commonly. So that's where you want to find us if you want to catch it hot off the press. Otherwise, through your usual podcast app a few hours later. All right. Thanks, everyone. Catch you next time. Thanks again, Paul.
See you.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast.